Hello, ladies. Welcome to the Women's Bible Fellowship. I gotta admit, you guys, this is really weird. I am sitting in an empty room with two of my favorite people and Pastor Jeremy, and just want to let you know that I miss you ladies terribly, but I really am excited to be here with you this morning and to just share what the Lord's put on my heart just from reading through Philippians 2 this week. So before we start, though, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Christie, and I work here at the Children's Ministry. It's been my blessing to serve here since I was a senior in high school. And this is very out of my comfort zone. I'm not used to talking to people who are my size and my vocabulary level. So if it's a little awkward, I'm so sorry. But a nice thing was I got some great advice before coming up here from Pastor Dave Cope. He and his wife Heather have known me since I was about 13 years old, and I didn't even have to tell him I was nervous for him to know. And so he just came up to me and offered me some great advice, which was, one, be myself, which is perfect because I'm naturally awkward, and I feel like whether you're in the room with me or there's a screen between us, comes across very clearly. But the other thing that he told me to do was I need to dress like myself. And so a couple days ago when I was feeling particularly anxious, I went to my closet, and it took me about 3 seconds to decide I was going to wear this shirt. And the reason I want to wear this shirt was because, one, it's comfortable, and I know some of you ladies out there right now are like in your pajamas and under your blanket and on your couch, and you have your coffee or your tea or your hot chocolate and whatever, and you are just very at home right now, and I wanted to be a little at home with you guys. The other reason is because my sister bought me this shirt, and I love her. It makes me feel special when I wear it. Also, the message, in case the camera does this weird flippy thing on my shirt, it says, spoiler alert, the tomb was empty, Luke 24:24. And with Easter coming up, I love to wear it as a great conversation starter, especially when I'm out doing grocery shopping in our isolation kind of culture right now. It's a great way to just remind people of the love of Christ. But more importantly, ladies, I want to wear the shirt because I needed the message. There's just so much going on in our world right now, and it is so easy to be overwhelmed with fear and the trials and tribulations, the things that we hear on the news and the things that are going on in our personal life, that it's so easy to lose sight of Christ, who, despite the chaos, is in control of it all. And I really wanted to wear this shirt to remind myself that, ladies, we serve the Savior who conquered fear and death, so that even in the midst of our trials and tribulations and our fears, we can say, death, where is your sting? Hades, where is your victory? Don't you know I am the servant of the King who has already conquered all this, and one day everything will be made new. And I do not have to be afraid because I serve the God who has everything in his hands. And with that in mind, ladies, let's open up with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for giving us, Lord, just this opportunity, despite the circumstances, to come gather together, Lord, in your spirit and fellowship together, and to just read your word, Lord, and glean from this this testimony that you've given us, Lord, not just of the relationship of Paul and the Philippian church, Lord, but also just of Paul and his service, God. Lord, thank you that Philippians is a book of joy, something we so desperately need in this times, but it also has so much practical application, God. So, Lord, I just ask that you would open our hearts today, Lord, that you would just open our eyes and our ears, and, Lord, that we would just hear from you and the things that you would have us do during this time, Lord, that you would ease us in our fears and you would comfort us in our trials, Lord, and remind us, Lord, that to have joy, Lord, we need to keep our eyes on you. But also, Lord, as we keep our eyes on you, you direct our eyes towards others, Lord. With those things in mind, Lord, I just ask that you would be with us, Lord, that you would speak to us and you would go before us in your precious heavenly name. Amen. So, ladies, before we get into chapter 2 of the book of Philippians, I want to remind you guys that this is a letter and not a book. When it was originally written, it was meant to be done in one sitting, and so where we're dropping in this chapter, this is not going to be a build-up. We are not starting at chapter 2, verse 1, and going to build up to the points that Paul has for us. Paul, ladies, if you know anything about Paul from the New Testament, he was not a man of lukewarm passions. Before he met Christ, how he describes himself is he was a Pharisee of Pharisees. He was passionate about the law to the point that he persecuted Christians in every town and threw them in jail. I mean, his name was Saul of Tarsus. He was from the tribe of Benjamin, and he shared his name and his tribe with the first king of Israel. He was not a man of small standing until he met the Lord, and he literally got knocked off his high horse, which is one of my personal favorite stories and come to Christ stories in the entire Bible. If you haven't read it, it's in Acts chapter 9. But Paul is on the way to the city of Damascus, and the Lord blinds him, reveals himself to Paul, and from then on, Paul's mission in life is completely changed, but his passion for the Lord does not. Now, ladies, as we come into our study today, we need to realize the setting. Paul, the persecutor of the Christian faith, is now persecuted and sitting in a jail cell for the same faith he once persecuted. And his reaction to this is to reach out to his friends at the church in Philippi and to encourage them. And I love this about Paul. And ladies, just as it is with us and our friends, I think with Paul, he's able to speak a little more freely because unlike his other prison epistles, this is not a letter, unlike some of his other letters, this isn't a letter of correction. This is a letter of encouragement. And he's already been going, ladies. He did his greeting, he started talking about what's going on, and he's on a roll. And so before we can jump into verse 1 of chapter 2, we need to stop and back up a few verses because Paul's about to make this transition. And he's going from talking about suffering to doing a very short buildup, and then he's going to come to a crescendo. And I think it's very important that we acknowledge that Paul is very excited about what he wants to talk to his friends about. But if you take a quick glance at the first verse in this passage, we see that verse 1 of chapter 2 starts off with the word therefore. And anytime there's a therefore, you have to look back and ask yourself, what is the therefore? Because we're about to read is based on a point that was already been made. So we're starting today in verse 29 of chapter 1. So if you turn back with me and we'll start. Let me see. Okay. For you, it has been granted on behalf of Christ not only to believe in him, but also to suffer for his sake, having the same conflict which you saw in me and now here is in me. Therefore, if there is any consolation in Christ, if any comfort of love, if any fellowship of the Spirit, if any affection and mercy, fulfill my love by being like-minded, having the same love, being of one accord, of one mind. And we're going to stop there at verse 2 real quick. Because, ladies, the point that Paul is coming off of is suffering. And his reaction to the knowledge that he is suffering in jail and his family, his church family, whom he loves, is suffering and being persecuted outside, and he cannot help them, is therefore, because we are called to suffer, and we are called to suffer for Christ, he says, is there any consolation? Is there any comfort? And guys, if you've been in this space for any amount of times, you know the answer to all these questions he asks are rhetorical. The answer is yes, of course. There's consolation in Christ. Of course, there is comfort of love. Of course, there's comfort of fellowship of the Spirit. And of course, there is comfort in the affection and mercy. Ladies, one of the titles for our beloved Savior in Luke 2:25, he is called the consolation of Israel. In 2 Corinthians 1:5, it says, as the sufferings of Christ abound in us, so our consolation also abounds through Christ. I love Romans 8:35 through 39 because, ladies, whether you're being affected by the pandemic or there's some other trial or tribulation that's grieving you, it's always a source of comfort to read through these 4 verses because it says, who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? Or as it is written, for your sake we are killed all day long. We are counted as sheep for the slaughter. Yet in all things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am persuaded that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other created thing shall be able to separate us from the love of God which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. ladies, coming off the topic of suffering, Paul's point is this: but Jesus. Whatever's going on, whatever is hurting your heart, ladies, but Jesus. I love how Spurgeon puts it. He says, the Holy Spirit consoles, but Christ is the consolation. The Holy Spirit is the physician, but Christ is the medicine. Ladies, if there's something troubling your heart, there's something that's making you weak or feeling sick to your stomach, go to Christ. Go to your consolation. Go to the one who can heal you of it. And if he chooses not to heal you, at least let him comfort you. But then, ladies, there's a switch, and if you look carefully in verse 2, Paul does something interesting. He talks about the comfort of Christ, but then verse 2, he switches his attention, and he starts talking about the church. And ladies, I'm not talking about the building I'm standing in right now. We are the church. We're his people. We're his body. And when you read verse 2, it says that Paul is asking the Philippians to fulfill his joy by being like-minded, having the same love, and being one accord and of one mind. He wants them to have that unity. And he goes on further to illustrate this point in verses 3 and 4. Let's read. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind let each esteem others better than himself. Let each of you look out not only for his own interests, but also for the interests of others. Have any of you ladies stubbed your toe before? I mean, I know that seems like a really strange question to ask, but I vividly remember last year, it was the Sunday before VBS. We were tearing down the sanctuary when we were stacking chairs. And it got to this point where the stairs had to be stacked so high, and there were some tall piles that were short a couple chairs, and then there were some small piles that needed to be broken down, and we needed to put them on top of the tall piles. Like, it seems really basic, but that's essentially the setup. And so I was helping break down these smaller stacks so we can add them to the larger ones. And there were these two chairs I could just not get apart. Like, they were stuck, and there was nothing I could do about it. Luckily, a brother was passing by, and so I flagged him down, and he used his mighty muscles to separate the chairs, and he took one of the chairs and he added it to another pile, having no idea that he had actually, in the act of separating the chairs, slammed the leg of the bottom chair down on my left big toe. And ladies, he had no idea what happened, but I immediately knew what had happened. As soon as that chair made impact, the afferent neurons in my toe were sending a message up to my brain screaming, ow. My brain was sending the signal down to my foot saying, run away from the pain. By the time I had realized what actually happened, my entire body had a reaction to it, okay? I was clenching my teeth, my breathing pattern had changed, my heart rate had sped up, my weight had been mostly balanced at that point, shifted to my right foot instead of my left, my toe curled up, it went off to the side. Everything was done to protect this toe, okay? Now the big thing is the toe isn't that important. But it didn't really matter because my body recognized it as a part of the body, and because it was in pain, everything reacted for it. Everything was done in that moment to take the weight off that small part of my body and to make the burden easier to bear. And ladies, if you read in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul talks about what it means to be a part of the body. How we as Christians, it's not just that we're a church. He describes us as a living organism. He talks about how we each have a place and we each have a gift and a talent and a calling, and how we're all meant to serve each other. And in verse 26, he says, and if one member suffers, all members suffer with it. Ladies, we're called to look out for each other. We're not just called to point someone to Christ and say, let him be your comfort. Lady, there has to be a whole body reaction to this. If you see one of your sisters is down, go to her, lift her up, pray for her, ask her what her physical needs are. It can't just be, let Jesus do it. Faith requires a response, and as the body of Christ, we are required to respond to the pain and suffering and the trials and tribulations of those around us. We have a responsibility. And it's not a burden, ladies, it's an honor. At the end of our lesson this week, I think it was the very end of the last page, there was the word joy printed at the bottom. And it was printed as an acronym, the J meaning Jesus, the O meaning others, and the Y for yourself. And ladies, when it comes to how we look at the world and the things around us and the things we need to understand Christ has to be first in our lives. He has to be, like it says in Revelation chapter 2, he has to be our first love. But when he is our first love, our eyes naturally go to the people around us, and we need to serve them just like how Christ served us. And then we take care of ourselves. Ladies, some of you have too much toilet paper in your house right now. I love you, and I'm not condemning you. I'm just saying, there is none at the store, and some of you, your shelves are just a little full, okay? And maybe for you guys, it's not toilet paper. I think everyone I've talked to, there's been like a knee-jerk response to everything that's happening in our nation right now, and everybody's storing up on something, okay? All I'm saying, I'm going to let the Lord do it there, but if you hear your neighbor and they're like, I'm running out of toilet paper, and you're sitting on like a stash, do your sister a favor, give her the toilet paper, okay? It's not the end of the world. I love you. It's going to be okay, all right? But one of the cool quotes I came across as I was looking up this section, and I'm so sorry, I did not write it down. I found it once, and then I clicked on another page, but it said something like this. Ladies, if everyone is busy lifting each other up, no one is looking down on anyone. Ladies, that should be our business. Other people are our business. We need to be lifting each other up. It's what we're made for. And why should we do this? Why should we adopt this attitude that is so countercultural from the me, toilet paper hoarding society we live in today? Because we see in verses 5 through 11 that it's how Christ lived. And ladies, first and foremost, Christ is our example. So let's go ahead and we're going to read verses 5 through 11. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondslave and coming in the likeness of men. And being found in the appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even the death of the cross. Therefore, God also has highly exalted him and given him the name which is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, and those in heaven and those on the earth and those under the earth, and that every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Now, when I first started reading this section, the language was a little tricky, and I read a couple commentaries, and so I want to go through these with you. But I want to make something clear before we start. Ladies, make no mistake that Jesus Christ was both 100% God and 100% man during his time here on earth. And coming in the form of man, he did not lose his status as a deity. He has always been equal with God. It's part of that mystery that we don't understand, the nature of the Trinity. And I can't explain it to you, but at the very least I can go through the language that's used here in the first few verses, and we can go over how Paul saw it. First of all, in verse 6, when it's talking about that Christ did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, we're not talking about that there was some strange competition going on where Jesus or God were trying to one-up each other all the time. That's not what it's talking about. Another way it was translated is that Jesus did not cling or grasp to the prerogatives or privileges of a deity. Instead, he had the nature of humanity added to his own nature. And there is a quote from Poole that I paraphrased, and it helped me understand this a little bit better. He said that even as a king, by laying aside the tokens of his royalty, may disguise himself as a merchant, he has not stopped being king, and he's still the highest in the land. Lady, as our Creator came and became a part of his creation, he did not lose his status. He simply added something to himself. But outside of this, ladies, we have to understand that our Creator set the example for humility for us. And I think it would be easier to talk about Christ's life if everything he did wasn't done in a humble way, because from the very beginning, ladies, he did not exalt himself. He was born in obscurity, in poverty, in a manger, in scandal to a woman who had not yet been married. He was humble in that he learned the trade of carpentry from his earthly father Joseph, and that he had to be obedient to his parents. He's humble in the company he kept the disciples, fishermen and radicals and tax collectors. He was humble in having to wait 30 years to reveal himself. He was obedient here to his parents and his heavenly Father, and he was humble in his persecution by the religious leaders and his prosecution as an innocent man. He was humble in his humiliation, his torture, and his eventual death on the cross, a criminal's death for a crime he did not commit. And why? Why on earth would our Jesus suffer that? John 3:16, ladies, he did it for us, for the joy that was set before him. Ladies, I got to ask us a question, because as I went through this section, I was convicted. Ladies, how low are we willing to go to serve others? How far are we willing to humble ourselves for our friends, our families, strangers, and enemies? One of the things I love reading in the Gospels, and this may seem a little strange, is I love reading about the disciples. They are a group of dum-dums, and I am a dum-dum, and I get such comfort knowing that the Lord chose these men to lead the church. And one of the things that they constantly fought over, despite the fact that their rabbi, the man who they wanted to emulate and who was humble, they constantly argued over who was going to be the greatest. All the time. All the time. It's like they couldn't get over it. And in Matthew 18, verses 3 and 4, the Lord addresses it, and he says, "Assuredly I say to you, my disciples, my dum-dums, unless you are converted and become as little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." In Luke 22, verses 25 through 27, we see again that the argument arose, and Jesus again nipped it in the bud, and he said, "The kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and those who exercise authority over them are called benefactors. But not so among you. On the contrary, he who is the greatest among you, let him be as the younger, and he who governs as he who serves, for who is greater, he who sits at the table or he who serves? Is it not he who sits at the table? Yet I am among you as the one who serves." Probably one of the places I was surprised not to find this argument, ladies, was during the Last Supper. If you don't mind flipping with me to John 13, we're going to read, but I'll probably give you a little bit too much insight into how my poor blonde brain works. Ladies, during this Passover feast, there was something missing. Okay, during the Last Supper, they had all gathered together for this dinner, but there was a role that had not been filled. No servant had been selected or hired to wash the men's feet. And it doesn't record in the scripture that the disciples were discussing it, and part of my brain, because this is what I would do, just figures that the disciples finally got smart enough to know not to have a verbal conversation about what was happening around Jesus, and so they started giving like nonverbal cues. I can totally imagine like Andrew noticing there's no one around to wash his feet and looking at John, who I'm thinking was the youngest of me, like, hey, you should probably do this. You're the young one here. And John being like, Judas over there was supposed to have some money back. Why didn't he hire someone? And then Judas, of course, looking at him going, to Peter, because Peter was always switching feet out of his mouth anyway, so how dirty could his feet be to begin with? And I could just see Peter going, again, that's just how my brain works. But for whatever reason, ladies, none of the disciples stepped up to humble themselves and to serve each other. And so Jesus does. And in verse 1 of chapter 13, we read, "Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come, that he should depart from the world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. And supper being ended, the devil having already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, rose from supper and laid aside his garments and took a towel and girded himself. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel which he was girded." Ladies, this should not have happened. I love that Christ is our example. But in my human mind, this should have been the night that the disciples stepped up for him. He was about to go to the cross, whether they understood what he had told them beforehand or not. And knowing this, knowing he was going to be betrayed by Judas, knowing his disciples would leave him and flee, he still humbled himself and washed their feet. Matthew 10:24 says, "A disciple is not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master." Ladies, this needs to be our heart. I told you, ladies, as I was reading this section of scripture, I was convicted, and one of the things that came to my mind is the little deaths in my life that I have refused to die. And I was reminded how growing up, my sister, you guys, oh my gosh, my sister Megan is amazing, okay? She is just, I'm going to gush about her later, so I'm going to stop myself now, but she is amazing, and she's always been amazing. And when she was a kid, she loved board games, and I did not. I did not at all. I didn't want to do it. And for years, she would always come to me like, "Christy, let's play a board game or a card game or Skippo or whatever." And I'd always be like, no. Like, at a certain point, ladies, I didn't know why she was still asking me. Like, that was my attitude about it. And I didn't realize until I was older the damage I had done to that relationship by turning my sister down. I had no idea. And it took the Lord coming in and rescuing it for my relationship with my sister to be what it is today. I still know that memory hurts her. Ladies, how can we say to each other that we would give everything for each other when we're not willing to do the little things? What are the little things the people in your life are asking you for that you're not giving because you don't want to? It's not convenient. It's not a good time. One of the cool things for me is, for those of you who don't know, I still live at home, and it's a blessing for me. It's allowed me to see a lot of things in my life, and one of the coolest things I've seen in my parents is my mom is a night owl and my dad is an early bird, which means my dad goes to bed before the sun goes down. Well, not really, but like 9:30. He has to be out by 9:30. He's very off after 9:30. And my mom, if she could, her ideal schedule would be she could stay up till 2 a.m. and then wake up at 10 a.m., and that would be how she would want to live her life. They're very different people. They love each other. They're just very different people. And over the past few years, I've seen my mom make a real effort to go to bed with my dad. And when it started, it was very hard for her. But she knew it mattered. She was willing to die that little death. Maybe for some of you ladies who are blessed with a husband, your husband comes home and he just wants you to sit with him and watch TV, and you're like, "Have you seen the kitchen, babe? It's a mess." Leave it. Please, leave it. You have the blessing of a husband coming from a single woman. Go sit with your husband. Enjoy your time together. Your kids, you come home from a long day and they want to play a board game with you or go outside and play. Go play with them. You're not going to have those years forever. They're going to grow up. And they'll probably get out of the house a lot sooner than me, okay? Just breathe. It's going to be okay. But ladies, we see that the result of Christ's humility in verses 9 through 11, that God exalts him. Ladies, God sees your little deaths. In Matthew 5:16, it says, "Let your light so shine before men that they may see our good works and glorify our Father in heaven." In Matthew 6, 1 through 4, it states that we are not supposed to flaunt our charitable deeds, but to do them secretly before the Lord, who will reward us openly. We are not to promote ourselves, ladies. I love the illustration Christ gives in Luke 14:11. There's a wedding going on, and Jesus is watching everyone take the best seat for themselves. They're promoting themselves. We're like, I'm more special than you. I'm more special than you. I'm going to sit towards the head of the table. And Christ's like, you really shouldn't do that. Because here's what's going to happen. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. And that was given in verse 11. And what Jesus meant was, if you're going and you're taking that best seat, you may think you're all special. But when the head of the table looks down and sees that other friend of his or that other family member, that he's like, oh, that person made such a difference in my life, he's going to invite that friend up to take your seat, and you're going to have to go down. Okay? It's just the nature of things. Ladies, let yourself be humble so that Christ can exalt you. Let yourself be humbled so that God can be exalted through you. And ladies, let's just take a moment just to sit on the last couple verses, that at the name of Jesus, every knee will bow, every tongue will confess. Believers, non-believers, angels, demons, whoever's here, Christ humbled himself, and our God is high and lifted up above all things. And then we come to verse 12. Therefore, because our God, our Christ, is exalted, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you, both to will and to do for his good pleasure. Ladies, I would not have felt the significance of these verses without our quarantine social isolation culture we got going on right now. I never realized, I knew I liked people, I just didn't realize I needed people until I was told I couldn't leave my house unless I was going to work. I'm very grateful to be a nurse. I can't stay at my house this long. It's driving me nuts. But ladies, there was this separation from Paul, not just distance, but they can't reach out. They can't miss each other. He doesn't have the technology we have today. They're sending messengers to each other long distances just to give Paul gifts, just so Paul can send a letter to encourage. And ladies, in your absence, in the absence even of my routine of coming to church, because I've got a routine. That's the only way I survive in this world, okay? I am a very flip-floppy, go-with-the-wind type personality. And it isn't until the Lord's got me a routine in some areas I'm even able to be a productive human being. But ladies, I don't get to come to church 3 services now. I don't get to serve in children's ministry. I don't get to be with my little 2- and 3-year-olds or with my lovely, stubborn, sassy 4th through 6th grade class. I don't get to sit in the sanctuary with my friends. I don't get to seek out in person the women in my life who ministry, or seek out my friends that I can minister to them, and vice versa. We don't get to go fellowship afterwards and have lunch. And I took all those things for granted. But in the absence, ladies, it's forcing me to dig deeper and look at what my relationship with God actually is. Is it a routine? Or is it a relationship? Ladies, what does your relationship with God look like right now? Do you struggle like me with online things? Do you kind of tune in when it's convenient for you, and then kind of half pay attention to it, but you've got kids running around over here, or, ooh, look, Pinterest, what's going on over here? What is it? What is it that's driving you to Jesus? What is it that's keeping you from him? Ladies, I know this is a hard time for a lot of different reasons. I would encourage you, use this time to dig deep in your roots. Use this time to seek the Lord and to work your faith out with fear and trembling, knowing that the God who works in you, and he's going to use it for his good pleasure. Ladies, I love Romans 8:28. I feel like I use it for everything when it says, we know all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. Ladies, that's everything. And while I don't know what your situation is right now, while I don't know the things that are troubling your heart, and I may not know the depths of your sorrow or your fear, I can can just say from my own life, he has used everything for good. And I have faith that whatever his purpose is for allowing the sickness, the pandemic, the trials, the sorrows, the tribulations that we're going through right now, he's going to use it for something. He's not a wasteful God. And then, ladies, there is verse 14, which just on their own, just on its own, ladies, this could be its own sermon because this is applicable to everybody. Paul calls us all out as he talks about this, and he says, do all things without complaining and disputing. I complain. I complain more than I should. I'm sorry. I do. It's something I struggle with. When I think of James, and I believe it's in chapter 2 or chapter 3 when it talks about the tongue, how our mouth shouldn't be a place for blessings and cursings, I think about the things that come out of my mouth. How I talk about people, how I talk to people, how I complain about the blessings and the things that God has given me. Like my job. I love my job, ladies. I'm a nurse. I can't imagine doing anything else. But there are shifts. Let me tell you, there are shifts. I'm sure it's like some of you ladies, like you have your husband, and he's wonderful, and you have your children, and they're fantastic, and your grandchildren, and your siblings, and then there are just days you don't want anything to do with them. You need to, they're not being quite so angelic. Their halo slipped a bit, okay? Don't complain, because what would your life be like if you lost them? We should be grateful for the things that we have, ladies, but more than that, we need to understand that when we're complaining, when we're whining, when we're disputing, it does not set a good precedent for the service we're doing. I don't know what y'all were like as children, but I was a difficult child. My mom will deny it. She's lying. I love her. She sees me way too nicely. But she would ask me to do things, and I remember going, oh, like, do it. Like, that was not a blessing to my mother. My mother was not blessed that I was muttering and complaining. Yes, I was doing it. It's like, stop doing that. And I'd be like, I'm doing what you told me to. Me. It's not okay. And ladies, that's what it looks like when we serve the Lord and we're complaining and we're disputing. Don't do it. Don't set that example, please. If you have children that do that, I'm praying for you. There's hope. Hold on. And then, ladies, in verses 15 through 18, we see another interesting switch. We're going to start back at verse 14 because it's a continuation of that sentence. It says, do all things without complaining and disputing, that you may become blameless and harmless children of God, without fault in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world, holding fast to the word of life, so that I may rejoice in the day of Christ, that I shall have not run in vain, nor labored in vain. And I want to pause right there because that was weird for me, okay? Like, all of us should have our own relationship with Christ, and then Paul's over here making it all about him. Like, I want you to do good for me. And I didn't get it. It just sounded very strange. I know we all have people who pour into this, but I've never heard someone say, like, I want you to do really well for me. Like, that just didn't jive. But it makes sense when we start reading the verses beneath. He says, when Paul says in verse 17, yes, and if I am being poured out as a drink offering on the sacrifice and service of your faith, I am glad and rejoice with you all. For the same reason, you also be glad and rejoice with me. Because, ladies, in these verses, he's alluding to the fact that he's in prison and he doesn't know if he's going to make it. He makes the same point in verses 21 through 25 in chapter 1 of Philippians. And I think the reason that he phrases the part of the scripture this way, ladies, isn't because he's making it all about him. It's because he understands that the only thing we get to bring to heaven with us is other people. And that's where his focus was. When you read some of his other prison epistles, ladies, if you ever read the book of Galatians, that is one of Paul's harshest letters. And that's in the view of reading like 1 Corinthians, and he comes after this church in Galatians, and when you look into like the language of it, like he really does kind of at a certain point call them like dum-dums. I'm using the term dum-dum because that's my favorite, but he calls them dum-dums at least twice in the first 2 chapters. Like he questions their salvation even, and with the church of Philippians, his friends, he's like, I want you with me. I want you to have fruit, and I want to know that there was fruit from everything I did here on earth, and I want you with me in heaven. And ladies, that should be our hearts. Yes, I want you to do well with my sisters. Yes, I want the people that I minister and pour into, those children that I love to see on Sundays, and if some of you have them, I love them. They're amazing. Even if I have to tell you they did something bad in class, like, I love them. They're such a blessing, and may the Lord be with you as you raise them. But I want to see good fruit come from that. Not because I want to be like, I did it, but because I want everyone there with me. I want my family with me when I go to be with the Lord. And as we begin to close out this chapter, ladies, verses 19 through 30, we've seen how Christ is our heavenly example. And now we get to see in these last few verses how the earthly examples of the men that Paul mentions in this letter. Verse 19 says, But I trust in the Lord to send Timothy to you shortly, that I also may be encouraged when I know your state. For I have no one like-minded who will sincerely care for your state. For all seek their own, not the things which are of Christ Jesus, but you know his proven character, and that as a son with his father, he served me in the gospel. Therefore I hope to send him at once as soon as I see how it goes with me. But I trust in the Lord that I myself shall also come shortly. Yet I considered it necessary to send to you Epaphroditus, my brother, fellow worker, and fellow soldier, but your messenger and the one who ministered to my need, since he was longing for you all and was distressed because you had heard he was sick. For indeed he was sick almost unto death, but God had mercy on him, and not only on him, but also on me, lest I should have sorrow upon sorrow. Therefore I send him, the more eagerly that when you see him again you may rejoice and may be less sorrowful. Receive him therefore in the Lord with all gladness, and hold such men in esteem, because for the work of Christ he came close to death, not regarding his life to supply what was lacking in your service towards me. Probably one of my favorite dynamics in the New Testament, ladies, is anytime Paul talks about Timothy. Like, when Paul talks about Timothy, it's like when a parent's student makes the honor roll for the first time. He has nothing but, like, amazing things like, have I mentioned Timothy, who is like my son, who ministers with me? Isn't he awesome? He has my heart, and ladies, he does. Paul put into Timothy the work and the effort, and he ministered to him. They spent so much time together that Timothy began to develop Paul's heart for service, for people, for the church. And so as Paul's looking around for people who he can send to his friends whom he loves, he doesn't see anybody. But he has Timothy, and he knows Timothy does love these people as Paul loves them. And so he wants to send Timothy as an encouragement. There's something similar for us, ladies. In Titus chapter 2, some of you have probably heard talking about being a Titus woman. In Titus 2, verses 3 through 5, it talks about how the older women in the church should help mentor the younger as wives in character in different things. And ladies, I got a question for you. Do you have a mentor? I'm not even asking what your age is. Do you have someone that you can go to and ask spiritual questions to, that they could give you sound advice and sound doctrine? Probably even more convicting, ladies, do you have someone you're mentoring to? A daughter, a friend, a sister? Maybe you've been married for a long time and you see a young wife struggling in her relationship. Reach out to her. We're meant to be a community, and ladies, I feel like it's more in our nature as women to want that community. Are we reaching out to each other? Are we raising each other up as women in the faith? And ladies, it doesn't even have to be complicated. I'm not saying be like Paul and adopt a child, okay? Have a coffee date. You have a girl who is having problems finding recipes. And you can cook. Invite her over for a cooking lesson. Minister to her. I was really blessed with a relationship with a woman here at church, and it was great because she invited me over to teach me how to cook. And I still really don't know how to cook, but I learned a lot from her about God. And I learned a lot from her about what my relationship needs to look like. And I'm blessed by it. And then we see, ladies, Epaphroditus. When we're talking about gifts and talents and your place in the body, I love that, as far as I can tell, for obvious reasons, the only real gift Epaphroditus had was time. He had the time to leave whatever his vocation was and go see Paul, give him the gift, and minister to him. And while to some it may have seemed like a failure that he got sick, it wasn't. Paul was still ministered to just knowing that the church loved him enough and that Epaphroditus loved him enough to go and see and visit. And the really cool thing about this, lady, is Paul indicates that Christ cared about his relationship with Epaphroditus. He says that Paul believes that one of the reasons Epaphroditus was spared from his disease, which according to Paul was deadly, was because Paul loved Epaphroditus so much, and it would have given Paul so much sorrow on top of being in prison to know that his brother who came to visit him died during that visit because of a disease he contracted during the journey. I've been asking the Lord for an opportunity to share this, and I don't quite know how to put it still, ladies. So I'm just asking that the Holy Spirit would just shut my mouth if there's something that he doesn't want me to say. But ladies, you have to understand my heart. I love serving. I love serving here at the church, and not being here has been hard, and the Lord's just challenged me to find ways to serve even at home. But for a long time, ladies, I would not serve. And I had my reasons. Maybe for some of you, you have reasons. A lot of my personal reasons was because I didn't have the self-esteem to do it. I had a skewed concept of what it meant to be humble. And so anytime I stepped out in faith or just by accident used one of the gifts the Lord has given to me, and someone came up to me like, oh, that was such a blessing, that was so cool, and I would feel built up, I would think that was pride, and then I would crush it. And I wouldn't step out again because I was afraid it was a bad thing. Maybe for some of you, something holding you back is, I don't know what you were like before Christ. I don't know what you were like. You come to church and you see all of us and you think, oh, they must be so good. They have no idea what I'm like. They have no idea what I was like, what I struggle with. Ladies, it doesn't matter. Really, really doesn't. You are a new creation in Christ. And Christ knew what you were before he came for you, and he still looked at you and said, I want her. I want her in my family. I want her with me for eternity. I want her, and I want to use her for the people around her. Ladies, it is not humility to bury our head and can't say that I'm not good enough, because in its own way, ladies, it's a sense of pride because it's all about self. It's all about me and how I'm not good enough. It was all about me and how I shouldn't do this and how I felt and me and me and me. And it's not about us. Ladies, one of my favorite quotes that I have is from C.S. Lewis. And it was this quote that helped put in perspective to me what true humility is. He defines it as, humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking of yourself less. I want to put it into a way that might make a little bit more sense. In nursing school, I had a lot of tests. And trust me, you want nurses to take a lot of tests before we're allowed anywhere near you. But my least favorite questions were choose the most correct answer, because there were no incorrect answers given to you to pick. And yet, you could still get the question wrong. I hated them. Very stressful. But I feel like that kind of happens a lot in life. I love coming to church, and I love seeing the gifts of all you ladies here. And I feel like this happens a lot, and I do it, and I've been convicted on it, and so I need you all to keep me accountable as I try not to do it anymore. But when someone comes up and is like, oh, that was such a blessing, or you use your gift, and they're like, oh, that's so wonderful, or one of the reactions that we like to do a lot is like, it's the Lord. And I get it. I really do, because we're trying to put the focus back on Jesus, but at the same time, that's how I ended up crushing myself underfoot, because I'm trying to put the focus on Jesus, but then I'm trying to say, don't feel good about it, and then the person is still normally trying to tell me that I did a really good job, and so it's still about me, and it's not about God, and it's just, I get the intention, but I don't feel it's the most correct answer anymore. Some of you ladies at this church can really cook. Okay? I'm not talking about you can make edible food, because even I can do that. I'm talking about you bring something when we meet here, and it has all the other ladies whispering. They're like, oh my goodness, who made this? This is fantastic. And if that is you and you are doing this, I'm mad at you, okay? I really am. Or you say like, oh, anyone can do it. No, I can't, okay? I guarantee you I've tried. I can't do it. I really can't. And instead of telling me anyone can do it, it's the Lord, here's what I would really, really be blessed by. Give me the recipe. Or better yet, I'm not a good cook. Please invite me over and teach me. Because it does a couple of things. One, it builds a fellowship. It builds a relationship. And even if all you do is exchange numbers for the woman who asked the recipe for, you can say, call me when you make it if you have any questions. Or you can say, if you run into any troubles, call me, or let me know how it works out for you, how your family likes it. And you're building that fellowship, you're building that relationship, and you're building each other up. And ladies, that's what the Lord wants. He wants us to minister to each other. He wants us to use our gifts. If you're prayer warriors, and I know some of you are because I'm really blessed by you, I want you to do something kind of strange. If you're a closet prayer warrior and the Lord puts someone on your heart, I want you to tell them. I know that seems really counterintuitive, but I got to tell you, right after I was asked if I wanted to teach, right before this whole COVID-19 thing broke out, like there was a 2-day span where I got texts from 5 different people saying, hey, I'm praying for you. And it did several things for me. One, I was uplifted and encouraged, knowing that someone was praying for me. The other thing it did was it gave me the opportunity that it always gives the opportunity that if I'm struggling with something, I can come forward if I feel comfortable and ask for prayer about something specifically. And the third thing it did is that, because everything in my life was kind of chill at that moment, I started looking around going, okay, is there something sneaking into my life I need to be aware of? Am I becoming lax in a certain area of my walk? It did a lot for me knowing that there were people praying for me, and it awoke my heart to the spiritual things. And then when everything kind of came about, it really gave me peace knowing I had prayer cover. Ladies, before we end, I want us to open up to Matthew chapter 25, verses 14. For those of you who have read this before, it is known as the parable of the talents. And it is a very, very practical parable. And at the same time, it's very convicting. So if you could, we're going to start in verse 14 of chapter 25. It says, for the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country, who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them. And one he gave talents, and to another And to one he gave 5 talents, and to another 2, and to another 1, and to each according to his own ability. And immediately he went on a journey. Verse 16, then he who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them, and made another 5 talents. And likewise, he who had received 2 talents gained 2 more also. But he who had received and went and dug in the ground and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants came and settled accounts with them. So he who had received 5 talents came and brought 5 other talents, saying, Lord, you have delivered to me 5 talents. Look, I have gained 5 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. Verse 22, he also He also, who had received 2 talents, came and said, Lord, you delivered to me 2 talents. Look, I have gained 2 more talents besides them. The Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You who have been faithful over a few things, I will make you rule over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. In verse 24, then he who had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. And I was afraid and went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, there you have what is yours. But his Lord answered and said to him, you wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed, so you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers. And at my coming I would have received back my own with interest. Therefore take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. The end of that parable is terrifying to me. I think when you come to the faith, there's a lot of fear of displeasing the Lord and what the consequences of that will be. But ladies, when I look at the parable of the talents and I compare it to the gifts and talents we all have, one thing becomes very clear to me. Well, several things. First, it does not matter whether you have 5, 2, or 1 single talent. We are responsible for what the Lord has given us, and we are responsible for using it. One of the excuses that the servant with the 1 talent gave was that he was afraid to use his gift and to use in a way that wasn't profitable for the Lord. And the Lord's response was, you could have just given it to the bank. He's like, I don't care if you just use it a little bit. Something, anything that would give a return. Ladies, we can't let fear stop us from using our gifts and our talents. And maybe for some of you, you don't know what those gifts and talents are. And maybe you read through the scriptures and you're like, I don't have the gift of apostleship. I don't have the gift of teaching. I do not have the gift of administration. You're going through all these tenets. You're like, that's not me. My mother, and she's in the room with me, and I've said this to her many times and is with zero sarcasm. My mother has the gift of gab, okay? And I have been exploiting this since I was a child, okay? And what I mean by that is my mom can come and she can talk to anybody from anywhere about any time about anything. And normally somehow she gets to the conversation on the Lord, and she does it without even thinking about it. It's amazing. So I was in high school, and my friends were having problems I had no idea how to deal with. I would invite them over to my house, and I would stall them long enough for my mom to get home and start cooking dinner. And then I would bring my friends down, have them stay in the kitchen, knowing my mother was going to talk to them, because that is my mother. And she did. And all of a sudden, my friends are telling my mother's detail about the issues that they had been talking about, but she's getting more details than even I did. And she's able to give them sound biblical counsel. Whether they were Christian or not, she pointed them to Jesus. It's amazing. I love it. My sister, I told you I was going to brag on her. I love her. She is amazing. My sister is an accountant by trade, and she is an accountant, okay? Like, every bit of her. I love it. She is so financially savvy. You know what one of her gifts is? She can use QuickBooks. Some of you are like, how's that a gift? Can you use QuickBooks? It's a gift, okay? Someone needed to know how to use QuickBooks. Word got to my sister. She met the person at a coffee shop and showed her how to use QuickBooks. It's that easy. She can also do a budget. Like, if you need help with budgeting, like, she does that in her spare time. I'll see if I can put in a good word for you. But ladies, the talents we have, however small they may seem to us, we need to understand, if we go back to 1 Corinthians chapter 12 when it talks about the body, there is a place for everybody. Whether you're the person who sees things, ladies, if you're probably the eyes and you see things, don't shut them. Don't pretend you're not seeing things. That is not you doing your job, and it does not help the body if you're walking around with your eyes closed all the time, okay? That's how the body gets hurt. Your hands, if you're practical, reach out. Your feet, go. You're part of the immune system and you're trying to protect us? Cool. I like you a lot. But we need to stop acting like we don't have something to offer. I love you. is a strange form of pride and is no longer allowed. You don't know what gift you have or what talent you have? Reach out for a sister. Discuss it in your groups today. Ask. There is an opportunity. Lady, if all you have is time, it's a gift. Use it. There are plenty of people who would love for you to help them in your time. But ladies, I want to end today with the verse from 1 Corinthians 12:14. It says, "For in fact, the body is not one member, but many." And ladies, there's a place for all of us. Let's close in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you, God, for, Lord, being the creator and the artist you are, Lord, by not just making one type of person, Lord, but giving us all different gifts and different talents that we could use for each other, Lord, not to build ourselves up, but to build each other up. And by building each other up, Lord, and by humbling ourselves in that way, Lord, that we give honor to you and to the work that you've done in our lives, God. Father, I just ask whatever it is that's stopping us from serving, Lord, whether it's not being able to come here in church and be a part of our normal ministry, or if there's just something, some thorn in our heart, if there's doubt about where we stand with you, if it's the shame of our past, Lord, that you would remove it. God, you will use all things for your good and for your glory, Lord. Help us to have confidence in that. Help us to have confidence knowing, Lord, that we are your special creation, your special workmanship, that you love us and you came for us and you served us, Lord, not so that we could hide ourselves and bury our talents, Lord, but so that we could shine like lights on a hill, like stars in the night sky for you, God. Lord, give us that boldness in that time. Give us your comfort during this time and go before us, Lord. We give all these things to you. In your name, amen.